Well, good morning. My name's Steve Siegel. I'm Senior Director of Value Marketing here at Servicenow. I'm delighted to be joined today by Gerald Beaulieu, who's the Di Director of Product Marketing here at Servicenow.
Great to be here, Steve, with you.
Great. Appreciate it, Gerald. And so what we're going to be talking about today is ways in which we drive value through ITSM and IT operations with ServiceNow, specifically eliminating outages and bridging the gap between IT services and IT operations. So with that, Gerald, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Thanks a lot, Steve. And also, just to kind of know, we're trying to make this as interactive as possible. So for those of you that are on the live YouTube stream, submit your questions, and we'll be kind of monitoring those over the course of the next 30 minutes or so. And then, of course, let's stay engaged in the community afterwards. Follow-up questions, things that kind of come to mind afterwards. We'll be monitoring that for the next several days, and we want to keep that interaction with you. So with that, outages comes in lots of different forms and names. I think business continuity is another one that kind of resonates with a lot of people, and one of the main reasons why many of our customers have come to us, and those that are kind of looking at solving this issue are coming to ServiceNow. And of course, that takes on a lot of different meanings in itself, not just the backup, but also the systems itself. The continuity of employees being able to get access to their systems, that their performance and running at their optimum levels across the organization. There's a lot of obviously very key services that need to be running, not just from the employee's perspective, but also from a business perspective, where revenue is tied to. External solutions where they're tying into vendor capabilities, or their customers, or their shopping cart, as well as the core internal business services that need to run to optimize the operations. So this eliminating outages and getting proactive in front of it is key. And we're finding with many that are coming into the fold is, it's not that they don't necessarily have solutions in place, but they don't have very good processes. They're separate, lots of different disparate solutions, and they're kind of running in silos. So they might have the best of all product for solving one particular need, but there's no process to kind of bridge that information between these two groups, one that's providing the services and one that's making sure that network infrastructure is up and running. So they're dealing with lots of challenges with solutions they have in place, or lack of process, in many cases manual, and it's causing them to be very much of a reactive organization versus a proactive. And all that, and ultimately we want to eliminate outages and eliminate, even just a downgrade, a slowness of a service. May not be completely down, but it's slow. So all of these tie into that. So we'll be kind of touching on a lot of those key points here in the next bit, as well as some of the values that we're seeing from our customers that Steve will be sharing with you shortly. So let's start by just kind of getting grounded between the two organizations. I know many probably on the call today might be existing ServiceNow customers, and they're leveraging our IT service management solution today. It's probably where they came into, and they're know this all too well with kind of our core services that wrap our service management product, from incident, a self-service catalog, et cetera, powered by that CMDB of their centralized set of services and network devices that they're supporting. And then, of course, the operations side, who are taking care of that network architecture, whether it's in a data center, on-prem, various cloud solutions, and making sure that those systems are up and running. So they're dealing with lots of different solutions, applications that are running the business, as well as all the monitoring. Think about all the different types of alerts and monitors that they're kind of tracking, in many cases, thousands of them that they're trying to weed through on a regular basis. What we've heard, though, however, is that in many cases, they're not, that information is not flowing. It's not flowing proactively, and it's kind of done after the fact, or nothing at all. So we really don't, that visibility of capturing that information from operations of the service is not happening on a regular basis, if at all. If you kind of look at two key elements that are kind of fundamental, one is just looking at those monitor alerts. And there's some that are going to be critical that you want to get over to that service department soon to start triaging and looking at. But instead, they're getting the call from the customer versus the more proactive approach. And of course, that centralized CMDB. I'm always amazed when, in the early days when I joined ServiceNow, we'd be talking with prospects, and they'd always mention, well, we've got kind of an existing system in place, but we really have no way of knowing, what's assigned, what's associated with this user that's calling, or, if they're requesting some sort of issue on a particular business service, they really don't have even a tracking of that service. So it's like, well, that's kind of interesting. It's just a matter of getting that, discovered. But there's no synergy. There was no kind of communication from the operations team that's actually providing that data. They have that rich set of information. Let's populate that centralized SIMDB so they're all on the same page. They're all looking at that same data. And then on the other side, where the changes might have been after the fact, right? So at some point in time, someone needed to make some sort of change. But all the change management system was being used was more of a tracking after the fact reporting perspective versus an actual proactive, hey, we're issuing this change to someone in the operations team to follow up on, to execute on. Maybe there's some automation, maybe there's some manual steps, whatever the case may be. There's a great synergy, and that's where the advantages of these two meeting together from the standpoint of the data that flows from operations and then the process flows that can come out of service back to operations are kind of critical. So on the surface, it seems fairly, basic, but what we saw in practice is this wasn't automated perspective. It was very manual, very reactive, as I mentioned. So which takes us to, all right, well, how do I get to more of a proactive approach from both a systems, and it's not all technology, it's systems and process that goes along with it. And now, work with thousands of customers across both from our service management solutions as well as our IT operations product. We found kind of a standard flow that really works well when they were able to sit back and think about what's the best approach to ensuring we have a good unified process in place between these two IT organizations. First and foremost, starting with that centralized CMDB. And generally what that means is, identifying what are the core network, devices that we're going to do, from right down to the local, potential PC that's associated with each of the users, the network infrastructure, and then of course layering that with the business services. What are the key business services that are critical to this company? So it's bringing in people across the organization potentially, not just in IT, but also identifying key leadership within each of those roles. Maybe people from accounting, or those that are from the sales, as well as those that they're dealing with maybe the front end shopping cart or the website, et cetera. All these different types of core services that the business needs to run on. What is most important to them, and make sure that those are mapped out. And then, of course, align to the network infrastructure that sits below it. So a lot of time spent just on that part before we even get into, all right, the tickets and the triaging, everything that goes along with it. Let's start with what are we all unified and rallying around from a company perspective that we all want to make sure is up and running at all times. Of course, then that follows up with working with the operations team. Okay, let's make sure that this is populated on a regular basis. So looking at and driving that discovery, both from an infrastructure perspective, and then of course that second pass that comes through from a service mapping perspective. So having that data that's populating on a regular basis, keeping it fresh, keeping it updated, so that we're all on the same page of what's out there, what's current within our data centers, and of course, in many cases, their on-premise environment. Then you can start dealing with, okay, now that we've got that in place, we know what's on network. We can't support it if we don't know what's there. So now we know what's there. It's all standardized. Now we want to make sure that we have a proactive way of identifying the issues. So dealing with that from a more centralized event management, being able to use intelligence and operational intelligence to be able to drive a lot of that information and then feed it to the appropriate folks that need to be able to act on it quickly. So having that ability to be routed to the right person, so they actually have visibility of everything that's there. So this might be a major incident that could potentially come up. So ultimately getting to the right folks, routing it, and then allowing it to execute from there across the various processes that are required. Ultimately, you want automation, and this gets infused throughout the process. But when that change needs to happen, that automated process, that people are notified that they need to execute, or potentially some orchestration events that are driven. So you want to make sure that those most important ones are there at their fingertips that they can execute on. And then finally, of course, giving that visibility back to the CIO and other management leaders so they can see how are we performing. Do we need to go through and issue some additional reviews of how we're providing service to the business. Are we actually meeting our SLAs? Are we trending in the right area? Are we seeing things that might impact us down the road? So being able to gather the information, actually look at it more holistically. Are we meeting the expectations or not? And then adapting accordingly from there on.
Hey, Gerald, I've got a question.
Sure.
On the circle that you've marked number 5 on the automated remediation. Mm-hmm. Can you give the audience some examples of the different types of things that can be automated as part of a change process?
Sure. And that can start everything from the initial change request, ensuring that it gets tagged appropriately for the type that's there. And gets routed to the appropriate people that are responsible for that particular, CI that's defined in CMDB. So that's, kind of the basic level. Then you get into things like, for many, I'm sure they run a weekly, in some cases, a daily CAB meeting. So being able to automate that whole process, that's a very manual, time-taking issue for many of our customers. Well, we can now use something like our CAB Workbench, actually can automate a lot of that meeting setup. So actually being able to drive the appropriate folks to the call, to allow them to kind of work through the various issues, only bringing those that are needed, and have them, approve the various changes that need to take place in kind of a much more organized and automated fashion. And then ultimately, when something has to run on the network, you could have a pre-packaged set of standard orchestrated kind of change scripts that could then, whether it's a simple reboot of the server, or I need to, swap out something, there's actually some server-side commands that you can run. A lot of that can actually be packaged up and just through a click of a mouse can actually run and execute. And in other cases, it could just be, make sure you package up the instructions for the ultimate person that needs to perform the task at hand. So that automation can come in a number of different ways, from that simple routing to meetings to actual the end process steps that need to be run.
Okay, great.
So let's take a look at kind of an example that we see with a lot of folks that are coming into the Servicenow family. And quite frankly, just to be honest, there might be some elements of this for our existing customers that may not be leveraging our operations. They got some of this stuff in place from the standpoint of service management, but they're not, they don't have the full operations side done. So they're going to be dealing with a subset of these challenges. But looking at it kind of from beginning, pick your favorite service, whatever that may be. Maybe it's the billing service, or it's some sort of, another accounting service, or sales, or something that tends to either slow down, degrade, or completely stop at any particular time. Many of the organizations, because they don't have that information flow from operations over to service to say, hey, something's not looking good. The service is starting to get slow or flat out stopped. Let's get on top of this right away. Instead, what happens is the users who are impacted by that start submitting requests. And in the most basic world, that could be an email, maybe at best some sort of front-end self-service. What happens though in many cases is it just comes into a standard pool, right? For people to start looking at. So now you've got people within the service desk that are looking over the various incidents that have been reported, and they're trying to identify what they are. Is this something that we actually need to have someone look at now or not, or just go into the rest of the pile? So the time is being wasted. So cycles are being used to get this routed to the right person. So again, even from the standpoint of categorization, we're using people and power and time, and that could be of the essence depending on what the nature of the issue is. Now it's ultimately been assigned to someone. Well, what happened? We realized, maybe at that point, okay, this is a big issue here. This service is down or is about to go down. What happened? So now they're forced to start calling around, right? They're emailing DevOps. They're emailing someone in the operations. They're trying. Something happened to the service. Does anyone know what happened recently? Was there a recent change request that was done, or some an unplanned change in many cases, which becomes a big issue. And again, this kind of comes into that operating in silos type approach where they don't know. From either side. So, and this is something that many grapple with. And then ultimately, they'll figure out the issue is there might be some manual recovery. Someone's going to run to the room. They're going to remote control in. They're going to ultimately solve the issue. But time's wasted. This could be a revenue impact. This could be just a personal productivity impact. And then there's some sort of notification back to the end user that it's been solved. So you think about the potential length of time that could happen versus more of a proactive approach. So let's kind of take this now from, implementing, the full-blown service management and IT operations from ServiceNow. How can we kind of address a lot of those challenges? First and foremost, as I mentioned, that the operations has that knock. They have all those events and monitors that are coming in regularly into the system. Well, now I have the ability to, using event management and through a dashboard, actually see those that through intelligence kind of raised up, and we realize, hey, I need to start looking at this particular issue. Let's raise this up. That gets automatically routed to the right team. So bypassing the triage part, let's get it to the right team right away, identify it as kind of a high-level issue that needs to be identified. Now I have people on the team not only associated with that, but they can actually look at some of the history behind it. I can start seeing that, what's the trend of this? Is this something that's happened repeatedly? What are the other impacts regarding the service? Who has impacted the organization? What's the larger case? Because maybe someone's calling on some sub-element, but we realize actually the broader issue is that this is down, it's going to cause a lot of other issues along the way across the organization. So getting in front of that and then kicking off that change process. Now we have the automated ability to have people through a major incident all rallying around that one record. They all have access to not only the issue at hand, but also all of the related changes or DevOps, anything that's kind of happened related to that. We're all in communication to the point where, if necessary, that CAB meeting can be automated. We can then do initial kind of triaging and identification of what needs to happen. And then finally, the automated resolution that we were kind of talking about earlier, Steve, where they can actually initiate that request process, where it could run a script, and then ultimately, when things are done, let's be proactive. Let's actually notify the entire organization that potentially was impacted by that service going down or being slow, that we've resolved the issue. Right? We noticed there's a problem on whatever service. Let's go ahead and notify them that this service is up and running, so they know that they can keep on going. So,
no, that's great. I guess one thought or question occurs to me as our audience is looking at this. You've laid it out very nicely and cleanly about how the process steps go and the technology enables them. But are there any resources that our customers should look at? There's a lot of elements here that likely require not only technology to facilitate, but also some business process changes. Are there things that we provide our customers to help them in that part of the journey?
We do. We've got a lot of great, from on-site to ongoing resources that are available from the community that they might want to take a look at. One of the things that always jumps out that our customers have been leveraging more and more now has been the CMDB workshop. I mentioned early on that journey, establishing that central CMDB is kind of paramount to kicking this thing off and making it, a proper process. So we have a great resource where we'll come on site and work with you on kind of building out kind of some strategy around that particular element of it. So that's one thing in particular that stands out as a great resource that I recommend many people to reach out to their rep or account executive and look at the opportunity there of kind of doing a reset potentially for some on their CMDB implementation.
Great.
All this.
Oh, great.
So this course brings up, all right, here's the process steps, and here's the things that actually can be implemented from a technology and process perspective, Steve. What kind of, tying into your information, what type of metrics are people seeing? What kind of actual outcomes are resonating when they implement this type of solution?
Yeah, well, let me go ahead, if I may, and go ahead and share. We've actually we've got a new capability that we just launched back in February. I'm going to share my screen with you right now, and I'm going to show you where it is. And the reason that we put this in place, let's see. Okay. Let me go here so I can see this. And what I'm going to show you is our value calculator. First, I'm going to show you how to find it. If you can remember the word calculator, that's really all you need. Go on Servicenow. If I could spell it, that'd be even better. Go on servicenow.com and search for calculator. If you want to go on Google, just search for Servicenow calculator and you'll find it. And what we've done here, we've been working with Forrester Consulting for well over a year and a half, almost 2 years now, and commissioning total economic impact studies, and we've gotten a lot of great insight from them when they go interview. They've interviewed, I think now we're up to 20 live actual customers who have achieved value from ServiceNow, and they put together some business models and applied their total economic impact methodology to help quantify the benefits, because we've been talking a lot about, you know, how we help customers and how customers can implement on our platform, but there were also a lot that have been asking us, you know, what's the business outcomes this can help me achieve? How's this going to make an impact to my business? And so we've taken that feedback very seriously. And what I'm showing you here is this value calculator for IT. We actually have a couple others as well, just to show you very quickly. We have them also for HR. We have them for security operations. And I won't go through all of them. We have one for customer service and developing custom applications, and of course for IT, covering IT service management and IT operations. And basically what we do here is, if you scroll down to the left, you can see there's a base number of simple questions. We give you a little bit of help, but we know a lot of the benefits that we provide really do vary based on the number of employees. So what we're going to go through here is actually fill out this, and through that I'm going to show you, you know, where the value is based on all the things that Gerald talked through about, you know, implementing CMDB, self-service, getting automation of remediation, things like that. It's all built into the models. So I'll show you here. We actually have this scaling to the number of employees. But Gerald, I think you have a customer in mind. So why don't you give me an idea of, you know, kind of what you'd see as a typical customer, maybe someone you talk to in your travels of, you know, a customer. How many employees would that customer have? We're going to go ahead and basically build a business case here. So what do you think? What's a good number of employees to start with? Let's see. Gerald, I'm not hearing you. You might have gone on mute. I'm going to go ahead and make a guess that we're going to go to maybe 2,000 employees. Actually, well, why don't we bump it a little bit? Let's go to 3,000. Okay. Now what we do is, you see, as those numbers adjust, the different questions that we ask actually scale. But I'm going to go follow the numbers here. What we usually see is about 22 incidents per employee per year. But we'll up that a little bit, assume, you know, maybe they're experiencing 100,000 incidents per year. Again, that it will, you know, it will vary on the company. And what we have here is a projection based on the customers we've talked to, but it is not one size fits all. And what you notice here is that if you scale the employee count, that 100,000 number that I just put in, it overrides. It doesn't change. So the bottom line is, as you go ahead as a user and fill this out, as you put your numbers in, it goes ahead and will take those numbers that you override. Now you can look at here and see, you know, the total high priority incidents per year, and you might say, well, what are high priority incidents? Everybody can define those differently. Well, typically what we find is two things. One is they're this combination of P0 and P1s. It's the stuff that everybody cares about and focus on. It's the stuff that your boss calls you about if you're not able to, you know, if they're getting calls from their customers. I think you're welcome back, Gerald. I think you're off mute. Welcome back.
Somebody solved it. So sorry.
Okay, we don't know what happened, but that's the.
I could not get off mute.
It's the thrill of live television or live live internet. But typically we see these numbers are about 1% of the total incidents, which in this particular case would, you know, let's say bump to 1,000. Okay, and now we have this other tab here, this other link that we show. And notice that as I'm changing all those numbers, all the values here are changing. I'm going to go just fill out a few more things. Let's see. So Gerald, what would you think for a 3,000 person company? The model shows about 105 people in IT. What do you think is a good number? How would you like to adjust that?
Cross IT. Now, if we're kind of talking about both from a service and operations perspective. Maybe it may be a bit higher than that. Okay.
What would you like? What do you think is a good number? 200, 300, 500?
Ratchet up a couple hundred or so.
200.
Yeah.
Or how about we say 250? Okay. And notice here what I did was, you can move the sliders, but you can also type over any value. And the thing I'll mention is that we have these limits here. They're actually just guideposts for general numbers. But the reality is, if you see a situation where, let's say, your numbers are actually higher than the limit, you can just go type it in, and the calculations will work properly. What we found in building it was if we made the numbers too wide, then the values get very large. But no reasonable size company, except for maybe one or two on the planet, might get that large. So we just provide those as a guideline, but you can always override. That's the key thing. You can always override. And what we have here in the model is about 45 minutes. Basically, that's the hour. That's the handle time to work on a given incident. Does that seem reasonable to you? That's what the customers Forrester interviewed came up with. Was I should say they told us, told Forrester was about 45 minutes. Do you think that's about normal for a company on the 3,000 range, Gerald, or should we increase it?
I think it seems about appropriate. Yeah, I was actually kind of curious, how the numbers are kind of driven from that standpoint. You mentioned the Forrester side of it, from the dollar points and all that stuff. How's it kind of driven?
Yeah, well, they're based on the customers that we spoke to, the Forrester interviewed in the study. So that's what we typically saw. I'd say that, that number, I don't think from what we've seen so far doesn't change much. Maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it gets to an hour, hour and a quarter. Where you see a big range, actually, interestingly enough, is, and it probably will be no surprises, on average annual support staff salary. So this number here is the fully loaded support staff salary. And you'll notice here as an example, you look at this, particularly Gerald and I are on the West Coast and living in California, one of the highest cost areas in the country. But the folks who were in the study were actually in the Midwest, so their salary levels were quite a bit lower. However, we support international customers, and if you go to countries like India, for example, that's an area where you might go, for part-time people, you may go less than $20,000 a year. We can adjust it here a little bit, and just to show you what the numbers will be. But the idea being is that's a particular number where the variability, sometimes the ratios of IT to employees changes, number of incidents changes, but you see a wide variety on the fully loaded support staff salary, and that drives the differences. And again, that's going to drive a difference in the economic benefit for you.
That's great. So it's actually kind of using a combination of dynamic measures as well as what we actually saw from our customers and kind of modeling them together.
It all starts with real data, and then the work that we do with Forrester, because we talk to multiple customers, they call it a composite, right? And a lot of times what they do is they look at that composite and they'll take data points for maybe a smaller number of customers if they have a particular value area that they drive, and they really look closely at the overall model and say, hey, does this really scale for everybody? And usually what they wind up doing is to be in the effort of being conservative and helping us under promise and over deliver, right? They'll tweak the numbers down. There's also a lot of areas that they'll go ahead and look at different value areas, and they'll apply risk adjustments. Some of the cases are, we see great value when people employ best practices, but they recognize that not everybody does that. Not everybody's quite there yet, and so they adjust the numbers accordingly. And so a key point here is that not only do you see this big number, and if this is 3.3 or $3.4 million is pretty sizable, but what you see here is that as you highlight these different areas, right, some of that is a productivity increase. And if you look over to the right, you see that 1.6 million out of the total is an IT productivity increase. Faster support resolution, which comes about by use of performance analytics, 920K. Service automation, getting 20% of services automated, 325K. And then the economic benefit of fewer major outages, 480K. So we do actually, even at that, a little bit more than that, we break it down, right, and show you not only the number, right, but where does it come from? So in the case of the IT productivity increase, let's be honest, that can be a general number. Well, what's behind it? Well, when we talk about, automation, right, integration between business processes, reducing the number of touches on requests and incidents through self-service, it's those kind of things that drive the economic productivity increase. that drive that 20%, and in this case, for this customer, $1.6 million of economic benefit. And we go through each of those and explain that. And so what I'll show here, if you click here, and there's also a button up here, if you want to see the full results, actually, again, as I mentioned here, just to highlight, we show all this information, all these financial models, all these numbers are based on total economic impact studies. Yes, we commissioned them with Forrester, but they control it. They maintain editorial, they maintain the editorial control. We can't change the numbers even if we wanted to, which we don't. They go and talk to the customers. They get the data. They do bring it back, and they maintain it and make sure that we're sticking to the numbers as we go, as we share this information with our customers and our prospects. But for those who want some further information, right, you can click this button here, and you say download the full results. And Gerald, I'm going to use your.
Send it over to me. Let's give this.
Yeah, we're going to use it to you. And I'm going to say to Gerald.
Spelling now. Here we go.
Yeah, mainly because Gerald, I can pronounce. It took me about a year to pronounce your name, and spelling I'm still challenged by. All right. If I can spell director and Servicenow, I ought to. Oh, thank God for a drop down. Okay, and I'm in the United States. Okay, so if you remember, I think it was what, $3.3 million of benefit. Mm-hmm. So literally, and it's actually pretty snappy for performance, thankfully. What we do is put together this package business case, if you will, but it's tailored, right? And so what you see here is an introduction and overview of really what's the numbers, what are the economic benefits, right? And we break it down for you. So we show you the top level number. We provide an exec summary, right? So you can see that breakdown and where they came from. Basically, right now, same content that you saw on the online page. And did you notice that, to get that information, to see what value we can help provide you, we wanted to make it as easy as possible. So you didn't even have to put in any information to get some of these numbers, right?
This is phenomenal. And then just to let you know, I have received the email. So
okay.
It's in my inbox. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Great. Well, yeah, click it and keep me honest and make sure that it brings you to the same business case. Check the numbers.
Same data. I'm in there right now.
Cool.
Do you have one quick question, actually?
Yeah, sure.
From the outages, it's obviously the topic at hand. We're talking about that and kind of fewer outages.
Yeah.
The 25% number. Does that include any kind of savings to customer reputation as well?
Interestingly enough, it actually does not include those numbers, and let me explain why. All of this is primarily based on productivity improvements within IT and across the broader organization. There's obviously, as you can imagine, with service outages, there's a big impact. And the net of it was, and this is an area kind of like I alluded to earlier, it's really difficult to get a common number with regard to what's the value of reputation? What's the cost if you lose reputation? I will tell you, one of the customers that was in the study was an airline. As you could well imagine, the implications for an airline when there's a service outage can be, start at critical and become ultimately catastrophic. Forrester's recommendation, and we certainly agreed, was that, the bottom line is those numbers get to be astronomical. And what we wanted to do is just say, look, the numbers here and the productivity benefits, which by the way, more than substantiate the investment, we think they're enough because people, I don't think, really need to be reminded on, what happens if there's a service outage and it makes the front page and all that kind of thing. That's only going to, if we help avoid those to some extent, that's only going to save them more money, more benefit. But what we found was that putting numbers to those really made the numbers, very, very large, extremely large in certain cases. And we thought better to just simply be conservative and that kind of thing. So, but at any rate, that's really why those numbers aren't there. But think of it this way: that's really upside. If we really, the extent to which we really help a customer avoid an outage, numbers, benefit numbers are going to be much, much bigger, most likely, than what we're showing. Again, trying to be conservative. The point that I'll make on this slide and this part of the business case, rather, that for all of them, is what we really wanted to do here is show you how the numbers come about. We show you how we help deliver the value. We talk about how it comes about in terms of dollars. We share customer quotes. So, again, this is all based on real calculations. And then we go, and real customers, I should say. And then we get into the nits and gnats for those who are really financially oriented and want to read the details. We talk about how the numbers are calculated and how we arrive at it. So you understand, we're not just putting numbers up here and throwing big numbers around, showing that there's real methodology and real analysis that sits behind this. I'm going to skim down to there's a couple of other pieces that we provide just to make it a little bit easier to understand other elements we provide. We provide a quick summary here. You can see the default values that are in the model when you first click in on it, and you can see where you made changes and where you differ, right? So in this case, if your support staff salary is different, et cetera, with the whole idea of that you can just really tailor it to your particular needs. There's a little bit more here from Forrester on their TEI methodology, which we think is really helpful and important. Again, this comes directly from them as far as their methodology and the fact that they maintain editorial control. So I hope you believe me, but you shouldn't have to, because it's all from there, all from Forrester and the methodology that they deployed. And then we just provide some additional resources. So if you really want to get into the details and get as much detail as possible on this, you can read the full-blown TEI study. In this case, we point to the one for ITSM, which is one I was involved with in commissioning. But we also provide some other useful assets like best practices and some of the videos we have, as well as some of the easier pointers if you need to be able to look at our products, look at our solution pages, and those kinds of things. So with that, that's really it in a nutshell. But the bottom line is, you can see here in this case, if you come back and answer, 6 or 7 questions. If you don't know the answers, you have tooltips. You can go find them. You can go back and adjust the answers to the questions. But you can see in, literally a minute or so, you can get an idea of, hey, I'm looking at Servicenow. What's the value I can hope to achieve? Or if I've deployed Servicenow, hey, let me go check and make sure that we think we're getting a value in this ballpark. We hope that you're actually getting more. If you're not getting the level of value described here, you should let us know. You should let your account teams know, because likely there's some areas and some of the best practices and things that Gerald pointed to that we should be able to help you get more value out of it than you might be experiencing. And again, it's all about the value we can help you achieve and your customer success. So with that, I'm going to pass the ball back to Gerald, if I may.
Absolutely,
we can
phenomenal data.
We can go ahead and wrap up here.
Phenomenal data here that I think they can obviously, to your point, bring right back and show to leadership, or if you're the leader yourself, to kind of say, look, how can we get to these same points? We've actually even taken some of those concepts and put them into our product through our benchmarking. So for those of you that are current customers of ours, you can actually see how you stack up against others. So using some of those kind of core concepts allows you to look at where are we at, where are some of the best-in-class customers, and how do I stack up against them, and then track that over time. So kind of using that. If you look at some of the other things, I mentioned the workshop before. We'd love to provide you even a more drill-down demonstration. The other resource I forgot to mention earlier was our business value workshop. We kind of look at a lot of these specific metrics that kind of, that Forrester drove to as well. But what are some of those things that where you need to see value? What do you want the outcomes to be? And then kind of obviously track and match them longer term. Always connect with our customers, and that's kind of the shout out back to the community. Let's stay engaged out there. Hopefully many of you are going to be attending Knowledge here shortly in another, month and a half away. Scary. Probably less than a month and a half.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's a little over 4 weeks now.
Yeah. So a lot of work there, and it's going to be a great show this year in Vegas. We encourage all of you to come there. Great opportunity of connecting with customers at a number of different events. We also have a webinar on the 17th. We'll go into a little more deep dive on this subject. So start to show some additional product usage, as well as some other kind of concepts and strategies you might want to consider. So kind of taking another step, deep dive into this subject that we recommend. In all those webinars, whether they're on demand or live, if you go to our website and go to the events page, you'll see what's upcoming, and then you can register for them there or watch the on demand after the fact. So that covers that.
Great. Great. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Gerald. Go ahead.
You can say thanks a lot. This was a great opportunity to kind of share both sides of the house, from the product through what our customers are seeing. So great set of data.
Great. Well, thank you, Gerald, for participating on this with me today. For our audience, please go ahead and if you have any further questions about this content, please enter them in on the community. Gerald and I will be monitoring that and happy to answer your questions. Also, look out, there's a similar session that we have on the community on the topic of 45% faster security incident response that I did with Piero De Paoli. So encourage you to take a look at that. And then finally, also encourage you to go ahead and check out the value calculator. Run your business case. All you got to do, again, as a reminder, go into servicenow.com and search for calculator and find the one you want. Provide your answers, and love to see what kind of value you think you can derive from ServiceNow. With that, well, thank you all very much for your time and attention. Have a great day.
Thanks all.